other obligations. Call this meeting to order of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority for Friday, December 8th, 2017. Roll call, Pledge of Allegiance. If Colonel Brown would lead us, please.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Colonel. Okay, acknowledgments, announcements, and correspondence. Mr. Hulemark.
Yes, Chair Rubio, members of the board, I have a couple of important announcements to make. First, on your agenda, you'll notice that we repeated the fact that there was East Side Parkway Environmental Review Community Workshop that was held the other day. It was quite a number of folks that attended. I want to thank a number of folks here. First of all, I want to thank our colleagues at Landwatch for making sure folks had notice about this. We did, in fact, distribute the notice very broadly. We put it in every library we could find. We left them in city halls. We provided copies to the press. I want to thank City of Marina folks, and particularly Gail Morton, for calling people, asking them to participate and come. As well, Supervisor Jane Parker shared that with a large group. I think both of them participated in the meeting as well, so it was very actively participated in. And also, the press engaged quite a bit. There's been a number of responses that have come back and forth out of the Landwatch email that went out of the participation from board members. We're getting a number of comments to the board. I think KSBW alone has had 100 visits to their post that they have on their site, but everybody from the Herald to the Monterey Weekly is receiving a lot of comments. So clearly the community is very much engaged in a third route that helps us get from one point to another. Where that route winds up is going to be the board's decision sometime next year, with community input and lots of discussion, I'm sure. Second, I'd like to point out our colleagues in the veteran community wanted to make sure all of the board members were aware, and the public, that there's going to be a special wreath laying at the Central Coast Veterans Cemetery on December 13th at 9 a.m. That's going to be done by Wreaths Across America. Third, I think at every one of your desks, and of course you probably have already received it individually, there is a media release that went out pointing out that the work that this board authorized the staff to do in coordination with a number of members of the board has culminated in a $6.8 million contract amendment for the ESCA munitions removal reporting and long-term stewardship, but also to help coordinate our work with the United States Army. This is all in service of the federal government, and since all of you have a copy, you can read the details later, but while I have a minute, and I hope you don't mind, I'd like to thank a number of folks that are here in the room that were very instrumental in helping to make this happen. It includes our local BRAC office and our local installation office. Colonel Brown and Bill Collins are both here. Both played a role in this that was crucial to our success in this regard, to make sure that all the right information got in and that we could make this happen. There are a number of past board members and current board members that participated in parts of the negotiation, and included folks here, Cynthia Garfield, Mary Adams, and Dennis Alexander, who's not here right now, all had a very important meeting with Tom Letterly from the United States Army last June that was part of the negotiation. You heard the part of that about the board's role in this. I know Jane Parker's office assisted us and was very helpful in all the work that we had done as well. Some board members, Ian Oglesby and Dave Potter, also participated in opening these negotiations when they were still members of the board. So I want to thank everybody for that. Our colleagues from MPC and CSUMB are not here, but they played a central role because both CSU and MPC have significant parts of this property that will be transferred to them that we've been working on for over a decade now. So I wanted to mention all that, and not to forget that the regulatory agencies, US EPA and DTSC, played a significant role. They are continuing to will continue to provide service as a consequence of this amendment and be reimbursed through the next year and a half or so of their work. So I just wanted to mention all that. It was important, I think, to all of us. Congressman Panetta here the last several months helped us to nail down a few of the fine pieces to it, and so his office made the announcement for everyone. So, Chair, those are the only items I have under announcements, acknowledgments, and correspondence.
Okay, thank you. Authority Council, will you read us into closed session, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair, members of the board and public. Closed session items today found on the agenda: 4A, conference with legal counsel, Government Code Section 54956.9D2, one matter of significant exposure to litigation. The claimant is Marina Community Partners. And 4B, potential litigation, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, paragraph 2 or 3 of subdivision D of section 54956.9, 2 potential cases.
Okay, thank you.
Matthews, his evaluations are being sent to Patrick Matthews. I mean, that's disgusting. That's goofy. I mean, and I'm no board ever works that goes to the
Gloria didn't turn hers in. She's waiting to hand it.
yeah.
Hey, Frank, smile.
I remember how it happened.
Yeah.
Somebody brought up the question of who pays the property.
Yeah, he was doing a good imitation of the Grinch. Okay, everybody take their seats, please.
They're sort of like the landlord. Okay.
Authority Council, would you read us out of closed session, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair, members of the board and public. Item 4A, conference with legal counsel, Government Code Section 54956.9, D2, one matter of significant exposure to litigation. Claimant is Marina Community Partners. The board heard from Authority Counsel on this subject, considered a couple of different options, has given counsel direction, but there's nothing to report out specifically. Item 4B, potential litigation, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation pursuant to paragraph 2 or 3 of subdivision D of section 54956.9, 2 potential cases. The board also heard from Authority Counsel on those 2 potential cases, and there's nothing to report out.
Thank you. The next item is a roll call.
Supervisor Parker? Here. Supervisor Phillips?
Here.
Supervisor Adams? Here. Mayor Edelin? Here. Councilmember O'Connell? Here. Councilmember Morton? Here. Councilmember Hoffa? Here. Mayor Rubio?
Here.
Councilmember Alexander?
Here.
Mayor Carbone? Here. Mayor Gunter?
Here.
Councilmember Garfield?
Here.
Kathleen Lee? Nicole Charles? I'm sorry, Hollingsworth? Erica Parker? Debbie Hale? Dr. Diffenbaugh? Steve Matarazzo? Dr. Ochoa? Colonel Brown? Bill Collins? Dr. Triblee? Lisa Reinheimer, and Dr. Moore. You have a quorum.
Thank you. The
Excuse
next
me,
item on
pardon?
the,
Thank you.
Thank you.
okay, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, which consists of approved November 17, 2017 meeting minutes, administrative committee minutes, water wastewater oversight committee, fiscal year 2016-17 audited annual financial report, and public correspondence to the board. Is there anything the board would like to pull for further consideration? Anybody from the public? Any public comment on the consent agenda? Okay, I'll bring it back. I entertain a motion. The motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next on the docket is business items. Item A, Economic Development Report. Mr. Josh Metz to present.
All right. Thank you all for the opportunity, Chair, members of the board, and the public. I know your time's valuable, so I hope to make this short and sweet. I don't think it'll be exactly 3 minutes, though, Chair, but we'll do our best to get close to that. So we're going to cover the topics here, some of which will be familiar and most of which I hope will be new. This is just to show you the areas that we focus on in our economic development program. The three in the center are the kind of conventional ones, and then the university liaison and real estate development focus is unique to our program here, which is built on focusing on our regional strengths, engaging with stakeholders, developing and maintaining resources, pursuing new business, and reporting and measuring and reporting our progress. So to that end, this is a chart you've seen before. The big change between this and the last time you saw it in August is about 100 new units in our housing. So we're making good progress on the housing, and we just include this so that you have it to reflect on as we go forward, along with the data behind the chart. But this chart shows our housing starts, and the column to focus on is this one here, showing that since the start of the fiscal year, there's been 108 new housing units, permits pulled from our office and paid for in the CFD revenue. So that's the revenue coming in to complete all the programs that we're working on. And you can see that the projected value for the total for this year is 258. We're at 108, which is a little less than half, and we're not quite halfway through the year, so we're kind of on track for hitting that number. Maybe if things continue to go well, we can even beat that number. The job survey, just to let you know that we're going to begin doing our new survey for next year in January. So we hope to bring you those numbers in March or April. This news, Michael already mentioned, and my colleague Stan Cook's going to go into more detail, but from an economic development perspective, these funds ensure that you're going to have the expertise in-house to enable the development of the properties coming through the ESCA program in the course of the next 2 years. So this is a great confidence for the region to ensure that this will, the transfers will happen within the next 2 years, and this will provide funding for at least a 10-year run of the expertise to help get the development done. Regarding business attraction, we have been working closely with this entity called the Central Coast Marketing Team, which has had a rather long life, but has recently been reconstituted and is an affiliate of the Governor's Office of Economic Development, known as GoBiz. And really what we do is we receive site location search information from state and national interests, and we are able then to respond and show them places around the region that might fit their needs. We also, through this entity, one of the major funding partners is PG&E. They have an interest in growing business and customer base, so they provide and have provided for more than a decade annual sum of money around $11,000, which is accrued. So there's a bit of a pool of money that we're able to use for trade show access and marketing content and power. One of the things we're working on is this Monterey Bay Regional Cannabis Policy Forum that's happening next Wednesday in the city of Seaside. And the intent is to bring together regulatory people and industry people to ensure that the rollout of the cannabis industry is as smooth as possible for our region. The Central Coast marketing team has also supported the development of the ecotourism concept that I'll be able to tell you a little bit more about in a few minutes. Finally, I just wanted to point out this program down here, which is an initiative that we're working closely with regional partners and in particular the City of Marina and the Marina Airport to gain a designation. There's a bit of a competition happening nationally. There's about 200 sites in the country that are competing for this designation that would allow research and development in the UAS, or unmanned aerial system space. And so it would give us an edge in attracting companies of this type to our region. And in particular, we think the Marina Airport is ideal because it has not only the city-owned business park development there, but of course the UCMBus properties that we're all eager to see developed. So this would really be something, I hope to be able to come back with some more positive news in the months ahead on this one. Here, I wanted to take a chance to show you this actually it's a video that we produced in response to board member and executive committee interest in development of a concise way to represent the progress in the region. And this video has been widely shared and has actually been our most impactful piece of media that we've ever produced. So I'll let you watch this. It's a little less than 3 minutes.
There are many wonderful recreational activities that we inherited from the military as well, including 2 golf courses, Bayonet and Black Horse. They're open to the public, they're reasonably priced, ocean views included.
We're getting more and more economic development as time goes on, and we build on a previous base. There's housing being built here, over 1,000 housing units. We have people moving into the area. We have different commercial developments that are establishing themselves. They all combine in promoting the economic development of the area. Del Rios is one of the 5 land use jurisdictions that comprise the local board. We're committed to sustain economic growth, to develop the lands that were given to us in a responsible manner. Perhaps the most important thing that's been done recently was done to honor the men and women that served in our old border. That is the creation of the Central California Coast Veterans Cemetery and the joint Department of Defense / Veterans Administration outpatient clinic, which can be used by all active duty personnel and retirees in this area. The creation of those 2 facilities will also create a lot of jobs coming into this area.
The elements of our economic recovery are predicated on the base reuse plan. This is really intended to be an integrated program of recreation, of economic recovery, of education,
The purpose of this video was really, again, to be able to convey in a short, concise, compelling way the major progress that's happened here since the base closed, and I think there's a lot that we all can be proud of for that. And we've already been able to use this in talking with interested developers who are relatively new to the region, and as well as folks out of the area, sending them this link and then gaining a kind of a positive interest feedback. Now, we are going to continue to develop this concept further, both with Central Coast Marketing Team funds. PG&E has been impressed with this video, and they've come forward with an additional amount, about $10,000, to help us develop another video of this type with particular focus on the industry. You saw some of the inside footage from one of our star companies here, Light in Motion, which is in Marina, at the Marina Airport. That is great kind of high-tech lighting and manufacturing company. We're seeing this type of cluster potential for a cluster of that type to develop, as well as others in the region. And so we'll be using that for more of a business attraction point of view, and then also to further develop the idea of taking advantage of the natural resources that we have for the ecotourism and recreation concept that I'll tell you more about here as we go forward. So that's available for your use. It's on all of our websites and everything. One of the strongest parts of our economic development program is this ongoing partnership with CSUMB. As I've shown before, we're really working hard in the entrepreneurship and small business area, as well as the sustainability and eco-recreation development side. So just this last week, we released a new website that we produced with the Institute for Innovation and Economic Development at the university, Startup Monterey Bay, and it's really intended to be a one-stop location for all Monterey Bay entrepreneurship news, events, and resources. So where we support the Startup Hackathon, the Startup Weekend, and the Startup Challenge. Those are a series of entrepreneurship events, as well as our regular tech meetups. All of that information is now housed here. One of the things we saw when we had a standalone event website is that after the event was over, our traffic to the site would pretty much diminish for most of the year. So then we had to build it back up. So the idea here is to have sustained use of a single site so that we can be most impactful continuing to grow this entrepreneurship stuff. Just a note on the hackathon, which happened in early November. It was the largest participation to date, 104 participants, 17 teams, wide representation from our educational institutions focused on disaster preparedness, very timely topic. I was lucky enough to be a judge on the final day of this 3-day event, and was just really impressed with what the students came up with. So I think there's a lot of potential for this type of event, and it kind of feeds into the next one, which is the Startup Weekend that's coming up in January, and then the big event, Startup Challenge. So I've mentioned the sustainable hospitality, eco-recreation. You might remember we had this event in February where we participated with members of the hospitality industry. We had a visiting Costa Rican delegation, and we had this really great event downtown Monterey, or at the Intercontinental Hotel, that was well received. That was followed up just recently with a Monterey delegation to Costa Rica, and there's many of us here in the room, a few of us anyhow, who were lucky enough to go on the trip. I was lucky enough to go through funding through the Central Coast Marketing Team, and out of that, this is a picture of the group at the President of Costa Rica, their nice office, and we met with the Vice President, who is this really strong female leader there. And then this is your more traditional Costa Rican experience with the zip lining attraction, which has really catalyzed the growth of lodges and other services in a previously rural area of Costa Rica. So it's quite educational. We continue to develop this idea, led by Dr. Shyam Kamath up at the business school, that the Monterey Bay region has real potential to sort of become the Costa Rica of certainly California, if not the United States, a leading destination for people with this idea of ecotourism in mind. I know last month you heard from Mohammed Absalam from the UC MBEST UCSC group, and just to let you know that we continue to hammer away on this one every opportunity we get. Just in the last couple weeks, we've had at least 3 different interests in various components of this property, and one of these days I'm going to come here with something real tangible for you all to get more excited about. We are also working with the City of Seaside and Marina to ensure that their main developments are moving as effectively as possible through the process. And just to remind you that we've got these upcoming events, the Cannabis Forum. We have CalEd, which is the California Association of Local Economic Development. They're doing their annual conference in Monterey in March. And Fort Ord is going to be featured. We're doing a whole tour of Fort Ord. And so that's an opportunity for us locally to showcase what's been happening. Startup Challenge will be coming up, and the great news from the city of Salinas about the Forbes Ag Tech Summit coming back for a 4th year. So that's my report, and I'd be happy to take any other questions or comments you may have.
Yes, Chair and members of the board, I'd just like to point out that throughout Josh's report, he talks about the partnerships and folks working collectively toward economic development success. Almost every single slide that Josh put up talks about how the various entities in the region are benefiting from those partnerships, whether it's with UC MBEST and the City of Marina on how the airport and the UC MBEST properties work together, or whether it's the County of Monterey, the City of Salinas, and maybe UC about potential farm worker housing opportunities that support economic development, or it's the California State University, Monterey Bay, working with entrepreneurs from Carmel Valley to Davenport on the full region. So we found that to be very successful, and also working with Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, the Monterey County Business Council, and others. These economic development efforts are more successful as we continue to build and strengthen the partnerships. The Central Coast Marketing Team that Josh has now become sort of the internal staff and the coordinator for is really also another way of referring lots of opportunities to lots of folks in this region that we weren't getting without that kind of coordination in the past. And so this economic development report is a precursor to one that I know he'll bring back next June to give some specific numbers, and I think you'll see with UC MBEST some real production.
Okay, are there any questions for Josh on this presentation? Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Oh, I'm sorry. Any comments from the public or questions? Thank you. Seeing now, we'll move on to the next item, which is a prevailing wage compliance update. Ms. Damon?
Thank you, Chair, members of the board. Sherry Damon, your prevailing wage coordinator. You have a report. I did not do a PowerPoint. I was asked to bring back this report at the last meeting on compliance. And so you have before you the list of the formal civil wage and penalty assessments. But I will tell you that I'm fairly skilled at tracking down and compiling information. It's very difficult for even me to find this information either from the DIR or from others. I had to work very, very hard to get this information, and still, even with the formal information, I got an email today from the lawyers who I contacted before I did this report, by the way, giving me additional information on mechanics liens, and that is not shown in this report. So in addition to the formal wage and penalty assessments that you see, there are also mechanics liens that get filed by the workers that work on Fort Ord projects. And on the Promontory project, there were approximately $1 million in mechanics liens that were filed by the plumbers on that project. And with respect to the Marriott Suites project, there were approximately $128,752 in mechanics liens filed by the soft floor layers, so the folks who are installing the flooring in that project. So Mechanics lien information is not reflected at the DIR. It's a separate process, but it's still an issue with the workers not being appropriately paid on projects on forward and having to go through that extra step of leaning a project in order to get paid. We outlined some additional issues aside from access to information. There are some, I guess I'll say, uncertainties in the area of law. The state has changed labor laws, and there are new interpretations every day being promulgated by the Department of Industrial Relations. Having some certainty with respect to how those rules apply on forward projects in particular, I think is of huge benefit to FORA, to the workers, and to the jurisdictions post-transition of FORA. Who is going to enforce? What rules are we going to enforce, and how are we going to do that? You know, that there are interpretation issues as well as application issues that are out there, and it became evident when we did the last prevailing wage training that the Department of Industrial Relations staff were not able to answer the questions that were presented to them. And you have a list of some of the questions that we presented to the department that to date still have not been addressed. Additionally, the city attorneys at that training, so that training was in September, requested that we try to meet with the Department of Industrial Relations attorneys to try to work through some of these issues with the attorney group and see if we could get any kind of clarity on interpretation of the laws and application of laws and answer some of those questions more specifically. We've requested that meeting and to date have not been able to set that meeting up. I did not ask for any specific direction today other than to outline some of the big picture issues that I see that are impediments to ongoing enforcement and trying to create the certainty that development needs in order to keep effective reuse going at the base and to implement the terms in the master resolution and how those harmonize with the state public works laws on an ongoing basis. And I am available for questions if you have any, but
Mr. Hopper.
I guess in what way could a jurisdiction be sort of monitoring compliance? Do we have models? Are there examples of other cities and how this is done? And in your experience, do you feel like we are more or less consistent with what other jurisdictions are doing with enforcing prevailing wage?
you always like to ask me the really easy questions. But I think a big part of the issue is we have a square peg and a round hole. We are doing military base reuse. For the most part, those projects are long and complicated projects, so they're multi-year projects, which makes it difficult to just apply a standard public works scenario. I mean, a standard public works scenario is, I'm a city, I go out and I build a road. The public works rules apply to me. I usually build that road over a year, maybe 2 years, and then I file, I'm done. In the forward context, though, I might have a 20-year agreement with a developer who's going to be not the sole person building. I might have 25, 30 people building. And so do I file something now when I enter the first contract? Do I have to keep the statute of limitations open for 20 years? So it's somewhat of a round peg, square hole. And until the Department of Industrial Relations changed its rule and its interpretation as to the application of public works as to certain projects on forward ord, it was taking it somewhat of a hands-off approach, I think, toward enforcement. The rules changed with SB 854 and the creation of a stronger enforcement unit within the State Department of Industrial Relations. And so that's what I mean by figuring it out all the way, because I think as the department advances in its enforcement activities and as we move forward on four-door development, clarification and certainty develops more over time, I think, as we see the continuum. There's different approaches inside the base prior to the department shift. The county employees had employed one approach, the city, a different, City of Marina, a different approach, City of Seaside, even a different approach. And we are where we are, I guess, is the best I can say. I think it's probably an issue that is going to be felt by every military base in California as they move forward in their reuse efforts.
Okay, Director Edelin and Director.
Yeah, Sherry, good briefing. Just a quick question. Have we asked our local union reps to go through their chain of command up to the highest level of the trade union leadership so they could ask the questions of the Industrial Relations Board that we're not getting any answers to? It's one thing to tell us to take a hike. It's another thing to go to tell the unions take a hike. They may have a little more horsepower to get these answers.
Mrs. Garfield.
Thank you. That was really very helpful, and I liked reading this, so it was very good to know. I do have a question about this. This doesn't seem like an issue that's going to get resolved very soon. There's a lot of unknowns and a lot of changing tactics at the state level. What if FORA's not here? What happens to the municipalities, and how would that devolve on them? Is it just the same sort of monitoring done multiple different places and times?
I don't know that I have a direct answer to that. I think that is some of the clarity I think the city attorney group was looking to flesh out a little more on some of the interpretations that the department currently uses, and that may be a slow process, or it might be faster than that on their administrative interpretations. But I wouldn't want to offer an opinion of exactly how it would devolve post-FORA or evolve post-FORA.
I do think it's something we should give some passing thought to. Thank you.
Ms. Morton.
Thank you, Sherry. So you mentioned the mechanics liens on page 16 of 20 in the staff report. You said that these numbers here were the prevailing wage complaints. And my question, when you mentioned the mechanics liens, is that an enforcement mechanism for the prevailing wage, that anybody that has is a subcontractor files a prevailing wage because the main contractor didn't pay them prevailing wage? How are you relating that to these numbers, or to the fact that we want prevailing wage paid? I'm trying to understand that.
I was just reporting that there are mechanics liens. There are other issues in terms of workers being paid for their work on the base, and a mechanics lien is a process, a statutory process, right, that a work person has to secure the work that they've done and to get paid on those. But it wasn't captured. That information wasn't captured, that the workers had to go through the extra step of filing the liens in order to get paid. And so that's why I included that in the reporting. It wasn't necessarily directly related to the prevailing wage amount, but rather they still didn't get paid. And so they went through the extra step. They had to file the mechanics liens, or maybe the unions filed the mechanics liens for or with them in order to finally get paid. They basically held up the project by filing the lien against the project so that they could be paid. Does that answer your question?
So the mechanics liens, I understand basic mechanics lien law, is that if you don't get paid, you can record a lien as to tie up title. But what I was trying to understand is a mechanics lien a mechanism that is used often when a prevailing wage is not paid? That's a new use of a mechanics lien that I'm understanding, if that's correct. And I'm trying to find out if that's a tool that can be used widely.
I don't know that it is well, you know what, I'm not sure of the answer, to tell you the truth, on that, because I hadn't thought of it in quite that way, but I suspect if a worker asserted that he hadn't been paid wages at the right rate, he could file a lien for the amount that he wasn't paid. I suspect that could happen, but I don't know the answer because there's a separate enforcement mechanism with the Department of Industrial Relations. So you might have to go through the Department of Industrial Relations before you resolve that. Do have Ron Cheshire here in the audience, who I am certain will offer some comments about this whole process.
So I asked that question because you brought it in, and I'm
I
saying,
did.
wow, if that's an enforcement mechanism that can be used, you know, that's something that we should broadly publicize if it's appropriate to use. And so the confusion is still there, and I understand we can't answer. But I also want to go through to, you made a statement that when FORA transitions, that it's unclear how or who will enforce the prevailing wage provisions that FORA enforces today. And I'm asking, at page 17 of 20 on the staff report, you identify the three classes of individuals that can secure the information whether payroll was paid appropriately. One being the employee's representative, which FORA is not, unless FORA is a part of the contract. The body awarding the contract, which FORA would not be, such as on Spring Hill Suites, and neither is Marina. And or third, the member of the public can ask for it as a public records request, but as you state here, it's often difficult to read because everything's redacted. So my question to you is, to what are you referring as our enforcement that we're doing now, that you are concerned how that's going to be transferred in the future in 2020 to other jurisdictions?
So here at Fort Ord, we have two layers of prevailing wage requirements. We have what I call the big umbrella, the Department of Industrial Relations Public Works definitions.
Right.
We have a smaller umbrella under that are in the master resolution. It says you pay prevailing wage on first generation construction. Right now, if you have a project that is considered by DIR as a public work, it's covering my little umbrella. But to the extent that the DIR determines that it's not a public work, then you still have the little umbrella. And that little umbrella has to be enforced by somebody. That would be enforced by FORA or by the jurisdictions
So, but this
for
goes
the master
back-
Resolution obligations.
Right. And so the public stands at this microphone repeatedly stating that, yes, the DIR is responsible statewide. Public works projects, it recognizes City of Marina engages in one, FORA engages in one, taking down the stockade, whatever is a contract that FORA is doing. But what the public is asserting to us as the FORA board, as I understand the public, is that you've created this little umbrella, in your words, the master resolution, but because the DIR is saying, we're not going to enforce what's under your umbrella, they aren't enforcing that from the standpoint other than what they would do statewide. They're not adding any layer of additional protection for what has to happen under that umbrella. And what I'm saying to you is, the public seems to think that this board, this agency, has not been effective in creating an enforcement tool for use under this umbrella, that what's listed in this report as the deficiencies is under the umbrella of the DIR. So when you say that something has to be transferred to the jurisdictions, the county, Delray Oaks, Marina, I'm asking you, what is that? Because so far, I don't know what it is, and I've sat here for 6 years, and I listen to the public, and in the transition task force that I've sat through for 2 years, there's never been a discussion about this is a responsibility or an obligation that goes forward. So that's what I'm asking.
Maybe the umbrella analogy isn't quite good enough. It's an overlap. So DIR enforces prevailing wage. master resolution has prevailing wage. So to the extent that DIR is enforcing prevailing wage, they are enforcing
Right.
FORA's requirements as well. So, but if the DIR were to say, you know what, there's a project out there on Fort Ord, and it's not considered a public work under our rules and regulations, then the master resolution provisions would kick in. We are obligated by deed, by implementation agreement, in all of our consistency determinations. We are checking those boxes about paying, and paying in particular on first generation construction. That enforcement would have to happen by the cities if FORA is not here, by the cities and FORA if FORA is here, to make sure that those are being complied with. Or we'd have to have some contract with somebody else to enforce. There would have to be some action that we take, the collective FORA and the underlying land use jurisdictions, to enforce those provisions in the master resolution. Does that give you some clarity?
Yeah, I believe the DIR is going to be there whether FORA is here or not. And so that's when I'm trying to find out what additional layer happens at this organization, other than the requirement.
Yeah, and in my experience, the mechanics lien is a tool that is used, and sometimes it's even the DIR that files a mechanic lien. Dr. Ochoa.
So I'm going to try a different sort of visual metaphor.
Okay.
Think of a Venn diagram, two overlapping circles. One big circle, DIR, Public Works. The little circle, FORA Works. To the extent that that little circle overlaps with DIR, it's the Public Works. The part of the circle that's outside of the big circle, that's the ones that are subject to our prevailing wage commitment, but not enforced by DIR. So do we in fact have ongoing activities enforcing that part of the little circle that is outside the big one?
Except that the Venn diagram in your example, both circles would be inside the big circle right now. There's not a piece outside.
Okay. So at this point, nothing that is going on is not considered a public work in the FORA circle.
Think of the big circle is DIR Public Works. The little circle is inside the big. I'm sure this is playing really well on the tape for the public. I should have had a diagram. The FORA master resolution obligations are subsumed in the DIR.
To the extent
circle.
that our commitment applies to things that DIR considers public works.
Correct.
But is there anything that currently is not considered public works by DIR that we are committed to? Okay, so the little circle is wholly inside the big circle, and so really DIR should be responsible for monitoring it all.
Director Hoffa.
So just to kind of follow up on this and make sure I have clarity too. So FORA determines consistency with the base resolution and the master plan. So part of which requires prevailing wage. Is it possible that a jurisdiction could, assuming FORA is not here and there's no successor agency sort of making consistency determinations, is it possible that a land use jurisdiction could approve a project on former Fort Ord land that did not include the prevailing wage provision because of some, hocus pocus argument this way or that?
Well, jurisdictions have somewhat autonomy. I'm not certain 100% that that's the issue. It's the issue of who enforces if a jurisdiction does not impose the requirements. So let's say a project went forward and it didn't have the prevailing wage provision. And I'm not saying any jurisdiction, I'm not making any judgment here on any jurisdiction, so let's say that happened. It was forgotten, whatever. The question will be, who is going to be watchdogging, who will be stepping to the plate to ensure that those provisions, those underlying provisions, are appropriately enforced.
Ms. Garfield?
I agree with all of you. Wouldn't it be that the same enforcement and oversight mechanisms would come into play that exist for all the other projects that exist for Marina or the county or Delray Oaks? It would be, regardless of its location, the same oversight, the same expectation, the same rules would apply, regardless of whether the land used to be Fort Ord or has always been Delray Oaks. From DIR's perspective. If it's public works, it doesn't matter where it is, DIR has oversight over it, and one of the things I've learned from our police chief is how many of our rules and regulations are complaint-driven, because the police don't check every backyard for this, that, or the other. And so wouldn't it be the case that projects like that we're talking about would be subject to the scrutiny of the participants, the laborers, the unions, the contractors, the neighbors, everything, just like every other project?
Yes, I think that is true. Where you have the military base reuse complication is in the situation where the DIR is not the oversight and you are implementing base reuse plan solely requirements. That's where I think you're probably going to see the biggest issues, because DIR is not the entity in charge of that, because it won't be falling under their definition of public works. They will have made that determination. And so then the underlying cities would have to gear up, and they would receive a complaint and have to figure out how to fix the complaint. And they have different kinds of enforcement mechanisms for the FORA master resolution provisions as opposed to the state public works provisions.
Now, it was my understanding that the DIR ruled and had an interpretation that everything on the former Fort Ord was considered a public works because of the subsidy of the land and all the other governmental subsidies that were involved in transfer of lands. So it's still covered under the umbrella of the DIR.
So DIR actually didn't issue a formal opinion as to all of Fort Ord. What DIR did do is they sent a letter to Jane Haynes, and they concluded that based on their review of a fact-specific scenario where it was demonstrated there was public money in the project, and they included a sentence in that letter that said, to the extent that there are public monies on a project on Fort Ord, we would consider it to be a public works project. That being said, you have other projects out there. There's plenty of disagreement about that depending on who you talk to. The Department of Industrial Relations has a process, a formal process, by which they make project-specific public works determinations. They have not entered into that project-specific determination for every project on Fort Ord yet. And I suspect that for some projects, they will be applying to the DIR for that project level determination.
Dr. Ochoa, you have something?
So if I understand it, what you're saying is that currently the little circle is wholly inside the big circle, but at some point in the future, it might slide out to some extent. Yeah? Okay.
Nice translation.
Okay, I'm going to open this up to the public. Any public comment?
Maybe one of these days you'll have a little seminar conference in regards to this, as Michael's tried to push for years. But there always seems to be a lack of interest in attendance. Ron Cheshire, Monterey Santa Cruz Building Construction Trades Council. Obviously, it's a very difficult subject. See, you're all quite amused by it. But the workers are losing a lot of money out there. And all I really want to say right now is I want to emphasize the fact that the report that Ms. Damon has given you is good. But what I really want you to understand is that there are a lot of workers out there that are very afraid to say anything. And without them coming forward, we can't take care of their situation. None of us. You have to have a live body to actually make a complaint that they're being robbed. Okay? And that's going on left and right. But again, you just can't operate on hearsay. So I'll leave you with an answer to Mr. Hoffa's question. Most all the jurisdictions here, when it comes to monitoring and being compliant with prevailing wage, you almost reach the level of ineptness. Only the city of Salinas, and I don't know if they still has a compliance officer. Most of the jurisdictions, it's not a priority for you. You accept prevailing wage or certified payrolls, which are pieces of paper which anyone can write whatever they want on. But until you actually go out in the field and see what's happening and interview the workers and take a look at what they're doing and verify it, you'll never really know what's going on. So whenever you decide to have a workshop or so, I'd be more than glad to participate. And that's it. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, to bring it back. Are there any other questions or comments?
I think there is interest in a workshop, and I certainly would support one when the staff think it's appropriate.
Ms. Morton?
Yes, there was a workshop scheduled in September, and many of us directors showed up to attend, but it wasn't the level of information that enabled us to address some of the issues we're grappling with today. And I do have one further question. On page 16 of 20 of our staff report, you identify the following formal complaints about prevailing wage. And what I want to find out is, were these precipitated because of the work of FORA? Or were they discovered because some other entity that had standing found these objectionable practices?
We didn't pursue any of this. This is just reporting the information about, I'm a coordinator. I did not generate these. I am compiling these. And up until recently, those civil wage and penalty assessments were on the DIR's webpage. They are no longer on their webpage. So
Okay.
Chair, I think it should be noted that in response to both of the questions asked, everything that we are doing in this work is exactly what was authorized by the Fort Ord Reuse Authority Board to undertake. Authority Council has been involved, I think, pretty much every single month on things related to prevailing wage when those questions come up. With respect to a workshop, at this board's request, we have asked for the Department of Industrial Relations to get a higher level person to provide that kind of input where we can have the exchange we need to get the information that the jurisdictions and others have asked for. We've worked with Senator Monning's office specifically on this issue. His office has been very helpful, particularly at the Sacramento level, but also here with Nicole. So if we can get DIR both to answer these questions and to provide someone at an executive level to show up, we are anxious to have that workshop.
Yes.
Ms. Cabral?
Yes, I just like to say, I have a comment that I have worked in the trades for many years, and luckily for me, I was union, and I had a union business agent who came out to the job and checked to make sure that we were having our wages paid correctly and hours and other questions that they come out and ask. So yeah, you do have to have a body on a job site. I was at one time not paid enough money, and there was a lien put on a company from down south who wasn't paying the correct wages up here in Monterey County, and so that there was rectified. But the only reason for that was I was working on Highway 1, and there were state inspectors, so they took head counts, and they asked questions, so they documented information. And so anyways, I know where Ron's coming from as tradespeople being afraid to say something, or, getting let go for lack of work, and just to kind of get eight-balled or whatever. Michael, I think that it's a good idea to get a workshop, and I know we attended one, and it was very informative, and where the cities and each jurisdiction has to abide by these rules of the DIR. So I just think that's a good idea, and I would say let's do that.
Okay. If there's no more on this item, we'll move on to item C, Environmental Service Cooperative Agreement Grant Amendment Update. Mr. Cook.
Yes, Chair, while Stan is getting his PowerPoint presentation up, this will be a relatively brief comment. I think everyone heard earlier our announcement. There are a lot of, almost everybody in this room should be proud of the work that they did on behalf of this. I don't know that there is anyone we shouldn't thank. I didn't mention the fact that we worked very closely with our colleagues in Washington, D.C. They've done some extraordinary work in this regard. Many of the things you are seeing here are the first time these kinds of contractual arrangements have been entered into. But again, I want to repeat, our local BRAC office, and you notice that Bill Collins shaved. He knew I was going to point him out today. And certainly the Presidio commanding officer, we want to thank both of them for their help.
Thank you, Michael. One thing I have noticed through working on this project from the negotiations that started in 2005 is that BRAC headquarters really appreciated the input of our local officials. It helped make it much more practical from the very beginning. Ralph Rubio was there from 2005 all the way through these latest round of negotiations. During this grant amendment here, for the last 2 years.
Is it a grant amendment, Stan?
What's that?
Is it a grant amendment?
Excuse me. It's an agreement amendment. I've used grant amendment for 12 years, and I now have to change that. So it's an agreement amendment, and that agreement amendment that we started working on 2 years ago, Jerry Edelin and Supervisor Phillips provided input to the Army also, so that would help make it very practical. We see that in the product that we produced. I'm personally very happy to know that funds will be in place to manage these land use controls that will be that were put in place by the regulatory agencies to protect our people. Okay. The amendment, to give you a little specifics, $6.8 million provided. It adds funds to line item number 2. The line items are there. This is right out of the grant amendment. Excuse me. It's not a grant, it's agreement amendment. Line item number 2. You can see that the first one, there's no additional work for the environmental services themselves, but there is work for the Department of Toxic Substance Control and EPA to review the documents that are there. Line item number 3, FORA administrative funds, that's to support us till 2020. Line item number 4, these are post-closure MEC find assessments. If something's found, who's going to assess it and bring that information to the regulatory agencies? The Army's funding FORA to do that. Line item number 5 is to manage the long-term, provide management of the long-term management requirements and the land use control requirements, which are what protect our citizens. So that was put together. The totals are at the bottom. The original total was 99 million plus 6,800,000 gets us up to $106 million the Army's invested in our cleanup. Thank you.
So that's a very brief report. It should be noted that in addition to these dollars the Army is putting up, the Army and the Department of Defense has also provided additional dollars for the cleanup of Fort Ord National Monument, so that'll also, the remaining lands will be transferred. I think that we're still on a schedule for another 9 years, Bill, before we finish that, or is it 7? 5 to 8, okay. We're going to call it 5 years then. Thank you, Chair. I think that's the end of this report. It's simply an acceptance. You've already authorized the execution of the agreement, and I'll do that now that the board is aware.
Okay, I just want to highlight again the funds and obligations end in 2028. That was shortened quite a bit. It was 2035 and 2037, and through the negotiation, we were able to cut some time off of that, which will help us in our final reconciliation of FORA. Yes, sir.
I just want to commend Michael and the FORA staff for receiving this award and or amendment, and also that it's because it's a testimony to the professionalism and competence of this organization and the high regard it's held in Washington. So kudos.
Very good. Okay, the next item is a public comment period. Is there any public comment at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to items from members. I would just like to say that we're having a tree lighting tonight, starting at 6, so you're all welcome. We're going to have a lot of kids on stage performing, and it's a lot of fun. So with that, we'll stand adjourned until our next meeting. Yes, ma'am.
Just to let all y'all know, through this weekend, it's free day at the aquarium.
Oh.
Through Sunday.
For locals.
For locals. So if you have a local driver's license, it's free for you and your family to go to the aquarium through Sunday.
Very good.
Happy holidays.
Thank you. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas, everyone.